Hello everyone, welcome to Wild Wild Wes's Gelvin Valley once more. We are continuing in the process of planting. We just filled our seeder. Oh, it looks like we're a little bit off. Let me turn on our GPS, get it cranked up. Yes, we have our warning on the right that we are renting this fine bit of machinery. And we are renting it in arrears because we didn't know how long it would take to plant the whole place. So we continue. We really have, well, we got quite a number of fields left because we did a real estate deal and have some more property, but unfortunately we're not going to be able to plant those right away until we get them tore up, picked up the rocks, smooth it out. So for here we're going to plant the easy ones for now, and then we'll come in and do some additional groundwork before we get to the others. So we have here 37, 8, 2, and 1 that we'll give a try to here. And then we'll be tearing up 12, 21, 23, and 47. So lots to do, and actually I do wonder too, we'll have to come through and fertilize all this, so lots of cost coming up here on our Gelvin Valley property. But I'm happy as long as we have cash in the bank, and if I can keep this puppy on the hills. Well, I just finished talking a number. Oh, and you know what? I'm doing the same thing again. I better start this thing up so I have my timer to tell me when I'm gonna be done. Yeah, that's the second time in a row I forgot. This time I caught it before continuing too much further, so just watch the time. I'm at 10:27, right? So if I get to, what would that be? Oops, get it down. I get to 10:30. No, excuse me, 57. That'll be 30 minutes from now. All these things I never think about until it's too late. Anyway, last time I was talking about all these things I've only done once in life. Hopefully there's been a few of your own you've been able to put in the comments. So I guess I ran out of things I could think of on that, and you know, where I make these videos here in my humble little office here at home, there's a file cabinet right across the way that has on top of it several old games. And you know, long time ago in these episodes, I was going to go through my entire library, or I say it's really our family's, that we have, and in between that, I mean, that was many episodes ago, in between then and now, we had a major cleanup, you know, where I got a different desk here in my office, and we took the opportunity to clean house a little bit. And there was just so many games that we had in our cabinet, and we weren't using them really. Shoot, I'm not even sure half of them even worked. You know, these have been accumulated over, well, really over a couple decades. And at some point, you know, you always assume that when you upgrade your computing technology and all that, that it'll just continue to be able to run whatever came before it. And there's no such guarantees. And you know, there's such a thing out there now called the DOS simulator. I don't know if anybody listening to this remembers the old days of DOS, or what that means. I'm not even sure what it stands for, but in the old days, you had to know a little bit of DOS in order to even install a game sometimes. It was just the operating system on which they ran. Well, then of course the Windows era came, and there's all sorts of new ways, that programs and technology is handled. So sometimes those old games, you could even install them, but it needs old drivers, or it's looking for old things, and it's ticklish to get the sound to work, and so we just decided it'd be a good time. Plus, nobody was even playing them. There was just some old stuff in there, and I hate just giving it away, but that's what we did. We took all of it to, what's the alternative, right? I mean, to sell it, you gotta put it on eBay or Amazon or something, and they're of course going to take their bite of it, and if you find the right person for each one of them, maybe you can make something on it. I don't know, but then you just have a whole bunch of hassle, shipping, maybe dealing with complaints or people wanting a refund, or I wasn't even going to test all them things. What if some of them didn't work, and anyways. We just figured it'd be easier to take it over to local Goodwill and dispose of it, so it is gone. I have no idea what they all did with it. Hopefully they made some decent money. I don't even know how many we took over there. There was at least 50, if not 100 games, and I know in this day and age of Steam and everybody and their dog making an app or making a game, in some ways the proliferation of technology has made some of that a little bit easier. Not necessarily good games, but in the old days, we had to buy them in the form of CDs, or I even had some that were the old floppy disks, the little, what were they, 3-inch by 3-inch. So these were really some old games. So every single one of them, they had, the nice printed manual and had the disc along with it, whether it was a CD or maybe in later years some of them were DVD. Maybe there was a lot of them that were CDs, but some even had, the old floppies. Well, and who even has the technology anymore to put those in? I have a CD drive somewhere that I know if I need it, I can plug it in. But I mean, they're not even, oops, shoot. It isn't even a standard add-on anymore, I don't think, to have a CD or a DVD drive. You have to specially request it if you're building a computer, and probably most people just don't. There's, with the advent of places like Steam. Why am I going so slow? Oh, there we go. Somehow I got my speed down. There we go. I must have been sitting on the 1 key for some reason. So suffice it to say, I ended up getting rid of most all of the games, that we had, including some that I'll be mentioning here in a moment. But some I kept. One was at the request of the kids. They wanted Flight Simulator, and it's like, guys, this thing is old. I almost think it was, oh shoot, I see it. Oh yeah, I thought it was 14. It's 2004. I mean, so there's stuff way better that's available now. And Flight Simulator is one of those things, well, even as I put the words together, someone can make the same argument with Farming Simulator. I was going to say, Flight Simulator, things are so much better. Although I say this without really knowing, because I've not played much in the way of Flight Simulator. It's not a huge area of interest for me. But I know they got some really cool stuff now, that's based on satellite data, maybe current weather conditions, just a whole lot more punch, bells and whistles that you could do, and way better graphics, far more realistic than what was available back then. But as a player of Farming Sim, older versions in particular, there is a particular charm in it. I know the latest versions have better pretty much everything, but still there is something that keeps me in these older versions. So maybe it's similar with some of those older Flight Simulator games too. Although the kids haven't played it, so it's collecting dust on there. But most of the ones that I chose to keep actually have to do with railroading. Oh, dang it, did I? I'm going to be lucky there isn't streaks in these fields by the time we're all said and done. So yeah, I'm just kind of looking up there now to see what some of them are. It's primarily the Railroad Tycoon franchise. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with that one. I spent, well, maybe kind of just the saga over time, and I know we all have our own histories. I spent a lot of time in college, way too much time probably, frankly, enjoying certain games, and I know I've mentioned before, I'm not a shoot 'em up kind of person, so I don't really enjoy games where you run around killing people or things. My head is more business type stuff, so that's one reason why Farming Simulator scratches a lot of itches for me. Plus, it's on farming, which is my favorite subject in the whole world. So, but back in the day, there was there was the era a long time ago, I think, of SimCity. There was a game that came out called A-Train or something, where you could build train networks. I never really got into A-Train. I think I had a copy of it sometime when it became freeware or whatever. I never really did get into it because by then there was better options. But one that came along that I know I and my siblings spent quite a bunch of time on was called Transport Tycoon. Oh, and I'm leaving streaks in this field. Oh, blimey. And every time you get on a steep slope, you just know you're going to leave stripes. Oh well. Can't do much about it without a whole boatload of work, so we'll just not worry about it. So Transport Tycoon came, I looked this up before starting this episode, they came to be in 1994, and I say they, really was one man, British gentleman, I think, that programmed it, name of Chris Sawyer. And so he published it in 1994, and for its time, the graphics just blew the world away. I mean, it was way better, leagues ahead of the other things that were available. And this was a time of rapidly changing technology in computers, and I know we so take for granted. I have a feeling those that take pains to listen to me or whatever are from an older generation, but for younger people, that maybe never knew or grew up in a different era, maybe don't realize just how much change has happened, over time in computers. I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't even know what a computer was. We didn't have one. It was I think I was in high school before our family had one at home, and it was nothing like what it is now. It was old school, green, monochrome monitor, color. I mean, there was just no such thing. And eventually, even when color monitors did start coming in, I mean, they were very cool, of course, but they were still nothing like, what we see here. Hey, what are you doing? Oh, it's been off. So lots and lots of changes, but Transport Tycoon, I'm not a programmer, so I don't understand these nuances, but I remember reading something about it that he programmed it in assembly code or machine code or something like that. Now, I don't know what all that means, but apparently he had to do that to enable the graphics and everything that he had, perhaps just to squeeze out every bit of performance that he could, with the old computing technology that we had. because computers have continued to improve and improve over time, so they're able to handle more, like we're looking at now, where it's nearly photorealistic, three-dimensional, but we're seeing all this, of course, on a flat screen. So the computing power, that it takes to do all this it just couldn't have been handled back in the day. But what he pulled off, with Transport Tycoon, it was just remarkable for the time. And so you had this world, I think they call it isometric. It was kind of 3D, a pseudo 3D, kind of a mix between two-dimensional, three-dimensional, frankly. Where you could raise and lower land. I mean, you could make your own worlds, and then you could build transportation networks in it. And it had several modes of transportation: trains, you had air transportation, you had buses and trucks, and even boats if you wanted. I think one of the things in the game was an oil well or something out on the ocean, and the only way you could get to it, was with a big old boat. And I seem to recall, a lot of it was based on real life data, although I don't know at some point if some of those companies told them to change it. Boeing said, hey, quit referring to these as 747, you got to call them something else, or it's copyright infringement. I don't know. But it just was fascinating to create a business simulation or a transportation company in a very colorful environment. I enjoyed it so much, played the stuffing out of it, and I can't remember if I've described this before, I even took it to a couple of my college professors, when I was there, and said, it sure seems like this is a game you could play in the classroom to teach principles of business. And they were pretty interested in it too, but like one of them said, you'd have to have the ability to offload data into a spreadsheet maybe, or something, to help with it. Maybe a creative teacher could sure do that. Alright, we got this one done. 37 down. Let's head down to number 8. Bang that one out. Open Sesame. And then a year later, I assume this made a boatload of money for Mr. Sawyer, but he came a year later with a sequel, and it was called Transport Tycoon Deluxe, and it was even better than the first. You still had the same basic premise. There was just more of everything, and I think the one thing I remember in particular that was greatly expanded was the ability to do signals on rail networks. It just made it a whole lot easier, and you were able to just do a ton more in setting some of those things up. And Transport Tycoon Deluxe is probably honestly where I spent most of my time, on that particular franchise. And towards the end of it, well, I don't know if it's the end of it or whatever, somewhere in the middle of it came the first, it was my first introduction to the world of modding, although I really didn't know what it was at the time. I'm not sure it was called a mod, but all of a sudden, and the internet was in its infancy kind of back in the day there too, and of course, being interested in this game, you eventually figure out, hey, maybe there's something on the internet on it. We didn't have the phrase, we'll Google it. I don't remember when Google came to be. But you would go out on these search engines and look up things that you could, and there was all sorts of fan sites out there for Transport Tycoon available that had tips, tricks, techniques, and I was downloading everything I could get my hands on, and we didn't know in those days just what viruses were, that kind of thing. I don't think there was as much of that going on, but just ate up that stuff. And then I started coming across, what today we would call modifications or mods, only they called it something different, and it was more difficult. With Farming Sim, they've made it pretty easy. It's not only can you have mods, they have integrated the modding type stuff right into the game itself. so that when you drop a mod in the mod folder, the game knows, what to do with it. It will recognize it as long as you've set it up properly, and then it will appear in game. Well, not so in the old days, if I can put it that way. I mean, you had to sometimes, some of these mods were modifications of the base exe, the executable file of the game itself. Well, oh boy, I don't know who figures out how to do such things. I sure didn't know how to do it, so you kind of took a risk when you installed these mods, because it was a permanent change to your game's executable file. So it made backups all the more important, in those days, or else, you kept your original install files, of course, because there was a change to your root game going on, that there was a forever type change. You couldn't just take the mod out, I think, without undoing it with a similar change to the executable file. So I started seeing things, there in Transport Tycoon, for example, you were limited on the size of your trains. The limit maybe was you could have an engine, well, not even just an engine, it was a number of spaces. It would take up 6 squares, and I think 2 cars maybe could go, is that what it was? 2 per square, so that's 12. So the maximum train length, if you had a single engine, would be 11 cars. And I may be a little bit off in the numbers, but you get the idea. There was a limit. Well, so I remember coming across this modification that said, well, do you want as many cars as you'd like, or at least a very long one? And they showed a picture of it, and of course, when you see a picture on the internet, that means it's true, right? So it's well, that's pretty cool. I'd like to have a long train too. Never mind the fact there were limitations on the size of the maps in there, so you might have a train that's stretched from one end to the other. But I downloaded it, sure enough, and it worked. There's another one that said you want to change the speed on your trains. I didn't particularly want to change the speed, but the novelty of it, I wanted to see it. So there were just a number of things like this, that were an early form of modding for this particular game, to where players could start tweaking it to the way they would like to have it. And at some point, I seem to recall somebody kind of gathering these various modifications, if you will, and putting them into a single program, to where you can now click the box whether you wanted them on or off. So it's just kind of a slow development over time. And it was done by players. It wasn't done, players who knew what they were doing, of course, how to program. It wasn't done by the game manufacturer in terms of setting that up. That's too tight. I'm just going to go down to the other end as well. And then something came out, and this was kind of after I basically moved on from this particular game, Transport Tycoon franchise, if you will. Oh, and the original developer, by the way, it'd be sure be interesting to interview the guy to see what he thinks about all of this. Because I wonder about the copyright things, and basically somewhere in there, down the date somewhere, let me see here, 2003, someone announced apparently that he was going to reverse engineer Transport Tycoon and make it open sourced. Now maybe you can do that. This is something I just read on Wikipedia. I just assumed at the time that someone was helped. Maybe Chris Sawyer was a friend of his, or that the game expired in terms of its licensing, so it was fair game, that somehow the programming had been revealed. Well, I don't think that's how it was. I think some sharp developer said, I'm going to reverse engineer it, and maybe there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, there is copyright protection, but if someone comes in and reinvents it on their own and they didn't steal your work, maybe there's not a thing you can do about it. Oh, hey, as I sit here, you know something? Folks, we are gonna make a change right here, right now, because I am so sick and tired of fighting this corner that here's what we're gonna do. Yes, we are. Let's see here. Plan it up to there. I am gonna reduce this to, you know, I'm probably okay here. I just need to, okay, it's that stuff that's over there that I want to change. All right. Now, let me carefully turn my, oops, I think I went over the top of it. All right, grass, here it comes, baby. We are going to fix this corner. My combine has steadfastly refused to behave, and it reverts to absolute nincompoopery whenever it gets to this corner and jamming its header. There we go. Okay, back to I gotta, let's see, does this get me what I need? I think it does. Maybe I'll back up just a fuzz more into here to kind of round the corner off. Does that kind of sort of get it? Oops, put it down. There we go. Yeah, in this version here, it totally redid the, okay. All right, that kind of gets us there. Now maybe to complete the little blip, I probably need a tiny little cedar if I really, really wanted to do this right. Okay, here, I can get it. All right. And the only way to get the field back, of course, is to dig out the plow. So I'll just try this here. Got one. I get one more in here. Gonna bend that wrong. Yeah, I definitely probably need a smaller cedar to really effectively do this right. So I'm just trying to plant. Yeah, and the trouble is I can't back it all the way in. Okay, so that's probably gonna have to be enough. Let me come back up here, and hopefully I don't have any canola that appears, but yeah, that'll keep us hopefully out of that nasty corner. And we'll just kind of cut it off, and hopefully never again have combines smooching the fence over the, ooh, before I do this, I better make sure I'm back on canola. There we go. Wanted to do that for some time, and I always forget when I'm over here planting, and just remembered to give that a fix while I was here. So anyway, this fella, whoever he was, ended up reverse engineering Railroad Tycoon, or maybe it was Railroad Tycoon Deluxe. And the amazing thing is, this game is so popular, or has so many die-hard fans. You know, would you believe it is still under development to this very day? You know, this is something that started in 1994, was it? The original game. And then, of course, it was 10 years later, you know, which is after Transport Tycoon Deluxe, which was released by the original developer, that someone reverse engineered it. That'd be Open Transport Tycoon Deluxe. You know, and at some point in there, and I don't have this one written down, I just know that it came, Chris Sawyer released what he called the actual successor to Transport Tycoon Deluxe. I think it was called Locomotion or something like that. I really don't know how well it did or that kind of thing. I almost think I have heard that there are people out there trying to reverse engineer that as well. And along with any number of other games, when it's really popular, maybe where there's a will, there's a way. If you get some really talented people working on it, maybe there's nothing that can't ultimately be reverse engineered. And I'd be curious to see. I know, in the farming sim franchise, there's been any number of ag games that have come along, but I know there was, it's been a few years ago, where there was a handful of modders who felt that there could be much more to the game, and maybe everybody at a certain level feels that way. But a group of them went out and they tried to create, what was called cattle and crops. And I think it ultimately flopped. There are people that said, well, at least it put pressure on the giants to improve a few things. I don't know if it did or didn't. Maybe it made them nervous. Who knows? But it was one of those early access games, and so I know a number of people, supported them. And I'm pretty sure a number of people have also said, never again will they take part in an early access game because, there was just some scuttlebutt, that was coming out, that all this money was paid in, overpromised, failed to deliver. At least this is what I've heard people say. I never did purchase the game. Maybe it's still out there. Some people have said it has some really good things in it. And maybe by now, Farming Sim is caught up, whatever that means. Not that there was anything really to catch up to. I still think Farming Simulator here is the premier game in ag simulation-based games. And if anybody feels differently, or there's something else out there that's better, hey, I would love to hear it. Because I would just soon be playing the best. Although I gotta say, it'd be really hard to give this one up to something else because, you get used to it, especially when you're doing modding, and you just get used to it, and it'd be hard to just exchange that for something else out there. But anyway, Chris Sawyer made his own successor to his popular franchise, but I really don't think that it ever took off or was as popular with players as was the Transport Tycoon Deluxe title. It just blows my mind that here now in 2025 we're in, that it continues, people continue to support it. And at this point, the graphics and everything that are in there, it's pretty old school compared to what's available now. I mean, what we're seeing here now is better than the graphics that they're using, but there's just something about that particular game, that continues to garner lots of support. There's, I know I've seen it before. I think that they professionalized a lot of it. They're using GitHub to track changes and everything made to the software, but it's still being worked on, and additional modifications are being made, graphics sets, types of transportation equipment, and so forth and so on. All I know is I spent a lot of time on it back in the day, and yeah, I was planning on talking about railroads, and that was kind of I did more railroading in it than I did of any other mode of transportation. Rails were just lots more fun for whatever reason. But anyway, we all heard the bell. We are coming down to the end. Maybe in another episode or two we'll have planting done and we can go get the ripper out and start taking care of our other fields too. Thank you all for coming along to watch, and hope you're having a wonderful day. We'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.